me, ARW, Bod, and James.
Hello.
Hello.
Right, we've called this episode Chaos because that's what it's proved to be. So, is we got anyone that wants to start with this particular episode? You've got 5 minutes to talk on the subject that you've chosen.
Well, chosen is perhaps an exaggeration, as we have randomly picked up from the brands of Doom. But I'll start off with the future of Fantastic Four films.
Oh, controversial.
Absolutely.
Well, great way to start.
You know, I like how you've used the word future there. You know,
Indeed.
fine there as well.
I'm sadly have to agree. The Fantastic Four have a remarkable place in Marvel and in the cinema as well. The cinematic adaptations. Famously, the Fantastic Four were the first of the revived Marvel in the 60s. So we have the iconic first issue with the Four gaining their powers from cosmic rays through an ill-advised rocket launch. We have them fighting the Mole Man, one of the blind subterranean ruler. And you have the iconic image, much replicated, of the great big monster bursting through the city streets. You've got early to mid-period Jack Kirby style that gets much better quite quickly, as we discussed in previous episodes. So the Fantastic Four are a really major property. However, there is an interesting history to this because in the 90s, as I think we have discussed partly previously, Marvel were going under. They were losing. They were not selling well, and they therefore made some rather badly advised film deals in order to basically get some money together. And one of the properties they sold off was Fantastic Four. Now the problem was because they were so financially weak, the terms of the contract were really skewed. And so the studio that bought it, Fox, were entitled to continue to make Fantastic Four films as long as they kept making them. Yeah. But they had to make them. So famously, they initially made a dreadful low budget one with Roger Corman directing.
Can I just mention here, as Bud said, Chris Columbus then. Obviously, bigger and better things with Harry Potter.
But it was a fairly dire instalment, and it was never intended for release, which is important. So it basically just languished in a vault somewhere, and that will lead us on to the latest Fantastic Four film, By and By. Now I have to say that I thought that the two other ones were not too bad, apart from the regrettable decision not to represent Galactus, or having this big cloud, basically.
Out of both those films, that was the single worst decision.
Yeah, I think the iconic. We talked in previous podcasts about Kirby's iconic artwork, and Galactus is one of the most iconic figures in comic books, with his massive stature, the great big armour, the sort of very Kirby-esque helmet design and things like that, and I think it was a total waste of space without it. And I think there are certain things also that the look of particular characters like the Surfer just weren't captured quite right. It was not bad, a silver man leaping around the place, but he didn't look quite like the Surfer with the iconic eyes and things like that. So it's a bit of a letdown. But I thought they were both quite creditable films. They were generally quite well cast on the Fantastic Four side, and they told quite interesting stories.
Dr. Doom came across quite well, I think, in those films as well.
I
say quite well. I mean, I'm not saying great, just quite well.
I would agree, but I've said before, and yes, forgive the repetition here, if I had the directorial control of this, or producer control of the future of Fantastic Four films, I would tell a Doom themed story as the focus, and I'd tell, because he's such a strong character, he's a fascinating character, and it'd be a really unusual angle on it, and I think that would be the way to go. Because one of the big problems was Doom was not bad in those two, but again, he should be great. Yeah. He's one of the great comic book villains of all time.
Absolutely.
And then you look at the last one, which was just dire. It was one of the worst comic book films I've ever seen in my life. And it was a bad film.
Yes.
2, it was badly cut, and I know Josh Trank, who directed it, actually apologised, because we said before, he did Chronicle, which is an outstanding film,
Yeah, that was really
and
good film.
they'd allowed him the same degree of creative control there, but the studio hacked it to pieces and they mucked it up. So the problem was that you ended up with a very, very bad film, and the problem is that it's therefore probably crippled the possibility of there being another Fantastic Four film, unless they do it right. I can't see them doing one of the quality that they did with X-Men, the X-Men films. If they did it that way, that'd be all well and good. I think that basically it's very unlikely you'll see it unless they make another placeholder, or more likely they'll sell the rights back to Marvel.
I mean, the scariest rumour is the fact that the latest one was they're going to do a Doctor Doom film.
Yeah.
It's like, please don't. I've seen what you did last time.
I didn't think the Trank movie was that bad. I think if you ignore Fantastic Four and take it as an 80s movie, it sort of works for me, but it's not brilliant.
I think it was horrific.
It wasn't a Fantastic Four film, was it?
No.
I think that's the key.
It was
that.
Yeah, no, it was.
We named it something else.
It had this the feeling of it's like, for example, Highlander 2, which is a dire film. And that film, like Fantastic Four, you had the feeling there was a generic story and they just nailed the likenesses of the Highlanders and the Fantastic Four onto these generic characters. And
time's up. Sorry, James, time's up.
Okay.
Thank you for your take on the future of the Fantastic Four films. If they have. So that subject is dead. Right, who's next?
Can I just point out that the other thing that should be considered with that is the future of the Fantastic Four with Marvel, because Marvel has sidelined them quite badly because they don't own the film property.
I must admit, I fundamentally disagree with their policy on that, and I know we've discussed that previously and we will do again.
Yeah.
Bob, do you want to go next?
I'm going to go with least favourite TV film comic adaptation.
Okay, so 5 minutes pod starts now.
I think it's a very easy choice for me to give my least favourite TV comic film adaptation. That's got to be, I can't remember what year it came out now, but the original Spawn film, when that came out. I mean, it was amazing that we got a Spawn film that time. I mean, it was easily one of the hottest selling comics of that period. But just when the film came out, it was like, it was just so lacking in what Spawn really was. I mean, the computer graphics that they came from that at the time, I remember thinking that was quite impressive. But the whole rest of the film and the way it kind of came together, it was like, it's not what it should have been.
What about the casting? I actually quite like Michael J. White, and I've forgotten now the chap who played the
Martin Sheen, wasn't it? Played Jason Wynn.
The clown.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody out there will know it, but yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I thought casting was good.
Casting was, I mean, Michael J. White as Spawn, I suppose if you had given him better material, he would have been better in it, I suppose. Yeah, he was serviceable for that film goes, but I suppose he couldn't help the film that was being made around him. Yeah, Martin Sheen as Jason Wynn, he was, fine in that role. You said the guy who played the clown, he was fine. But yeah,
available on Blu-ray perhaps.
I think it might be.
Is it?
I think it
don't
might
think
be.
I've ever seen it on Blu-ray.
It's only available on DVD. You have to pick it up.
I have it. I do have it from its original release. I must admit, I've been up to that one.
Considering this is the same time when the animated series was coming out, and that absolutely nailed the kind of feeling of Spawn. And I know Tom McFarlane at the time said, each version, is kind of adapted for that market. So you had the comic book version, sure. TV cartoon adaptation was one thing, the film adaptation was another. But this one was so not Spawn, whereas the other two just so were. And even though it wasn't a great film, it did okay at the box office. And there was talk initially back then of doing a sequel. And then Tom McFarlane spent many years working on that film, which eventually evolved into what would have been a Sam and Twitch based film. So you'd see the film from the two detectives' point of view, and Spawn would be like the boogeyman in the background. And I think that is still the take for the new Spawn film, which is, completed script. Tom McFarlane's going to direct it.
Are we not talking? It's 20 years since the original Spawn came. I don't know when it came out. Was it 20 years ago?
Spawn's about 20 years old, so
Yeah,
it'll
my
easily be 15
My copy
years.
was on VHS, so it's again.
Well, it's early days of Blu-ray as well. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was definitely around the early 2000s when X-Men and Spider-Man all initially launched. So yeah, good 15 years at least for that one. Yeah, here we are 15 years later and still we haven't quite had the next film yet. It promises to be far darker kind of film. Spawn won't be the main focus of it, despite that he will be. He will be the boogeyman in the shadows in the alleyways.
The boogeyman.
Yeah, because it's really what he is, isn't it? He's the thing you don't really see, like being a
I have
superhero
a
in
problem with
daylight.
calling anyone a boogeyman rather than a bogeyman. A boogeyman is somebody that dances.
For the benefit of those at
Boogeyman.
home, Alan is in fact dancing from the waist up.
That's all I can do. I'm a belly dancer, right?
A belly dancer.
Yeah, probably a belly dancer. That's probably right.
But yeah, so I think it's be hopeful that we get that. But I think easily that one would be my worst TV comic book adaptation. I could have gone with Crow City of Angels.
I think I could track you with that.
Can you? What would be yours?
Batman and Robin.
We don't mention Batman and Robin. The first rule about Batman and Robin is we don't mention Batman and Robin.
Yeah, you're probably right actually. Let's not talk about it. Let's pretend it doesn't exist.
Yeah, if your director's commentary begins with an apology, you know there's nothing to see there.
Oh my god, what a commentary. No wonder the studio disavows all...
Please pretend this film has not happened. Thank you very much. I don't think Zack Snyder's done a commentary for Batman v Superman, has he? That'd be interesting.
He's probably thinking about it.
Oh dear. Well, maybe not. But there's certainly a few contenders for that category.
Schumacher's got a bigger...
I think Spawn, Batman and Robin and the film I saw the same day, Judge Dredd, they're the top 3 worst TV film comic book adaptations.
Okay, done.
I would take issue with the Judge Dredd one. I think it was actually a very good adaptation of 2000 AD.
I prefer Dredd.
I think it's a better film. I think it's a worse version of 2000 AD because it hasn't got the humour in it.
Yeah,
right,
that is what really annoys me.
Sadly, we've got to wrap up on that one. The least favourite film, TV comic adaptation, which Bod says, is Spawn. Right, so I've chosen, when I say chosen, I've taken around a piece of paper, which I tore up earlier, and I've got Spidey, Dicto or Romita. Right, I think you're talking about 2 very iconic comic book artists of the late 60s. I would be honest and hold my hand up and say that I'm a John Romita Spider-Man fan, because that is the era that I personally grew up with. My first ever Spider-Man comic was Spider-Man Comic Weekly 41, which I think was Spidey versus Craven Hunter. I didn't really know Dicto's work until I bought some from a jumble sale, some Spider-Man Comic Weeklies which predated the volume that I actually bought from a newsagent. I can see that the style of Dicto and Romita are... James has subtly corrected me for saying I've actually written it down. Yes. I've written down Dicto rather than Ditko,
which is what it is.
And if you listen to any of our previous podcasts, you know that I make this mistake all the time. So I'm going to look at James's paper where he says Ditko rather than my one where I put Dicto.
Yes.
Oh well, that's probably wasting about 20 seconds. That's Ditko. Okay. Bloody James.
I think you're right to choose Romita over Ditko.
I wasn't actually going over Dick.
Out of all 3 of them, which one's your favourite?
Okay, I really have a head. I'm a Romita man, but do you know what? I do appreciate Steve Ditko's take on it. Let's face it, the first ever Spider-Man strip was actually, although not used, was actually scripted and sorry, not scripted, but drawn by Jack Kirby.
Yeah.
Lee decided he wanted a different look, assuming that Kirby's take on it was more of a muscle man type character, whereas Ditko was doing a schoolboy teenager thing, which you lose once you get to Romita. But you know what? There are certainly iconic images that Ditko did in the early years, which really live in certainly in my mind's eye. James has actually just shown me a splash page from Creepy Worlds, and it's the brand of the Brainwasher. It's got a lovely splash page by John Romita. There's just so much going on in that. Despite the Own Class comics probably not having the reprint quality of subsequent UK reprints, it is still amazing just to see that. And I think with the front of the cover, I'm not quite sure if that's actually been stretched or extended. It certainly looks, the framing looks a little bit odd, but we'll look at that in detail a bit later. So, Romita or Ditko, I can't make that decision. I think you've got a very solid initial run by Ditko, you've got a very strong follow-up by Romita, and I think Romita, he, like Ditko, gets better and better as the series progresses.
I think Romita's run on Spider-Man is strangely strengthened in a way by his son's run on the exact same title, where his artwork also improved during his run.
I think
it's almost like he's picked up where his father left off mine.
Senior taught Junior how to draw Spider-Man, and it must have been when Junior took over the title, I got off on that a great deal because it was like his father's style. The thing that really struck me was you bought me a hardcover volume and included the 9/11 issue by JMS, and it is so unlike the style he was doing in the 1980s. So John Romita Jr. really took that and progress, but I can't choose between the two. I think they're very, very strong, iconic artists on an iconic title. And I think given I've got 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1, I'm done. Yeah! Right, who's next?
I'll do the one that you're crumpling.
That's
my topic. There you go.
Yeah, I took James's Ditko.
Yes,
slip.
it's just because Dicto is getting an awful lot of out in here, and it is a dick, basically. My topic is the MCU.
The MCU, okay.
It's 5 minutes enough.
No, well, it'll have to be.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. Okay, sorry, let me stop the time. Here we go. Right, 5 minutes.
Okay, my topic is the MCU, which for those who don't know is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Very interesting concept that. Marvel, even back in its, one of the things that defined it as a comic book company back in the 60s was that they went for a fairly coherent and cohesive universe as opposed to DC's approach, which is full of huge amounts of variance and alternative takes on worlds, characters, contradictory continuity. It really was all over the place. Superman, Superboy, they all just completely contradict each other. Marvel went for the idea that it was set in one coherent universe, and the places in that universe, places like New York, you didn't have Metropolis and Gotham. You had actual cities, so it's grounded in a way. And I think that also aided it when it devised characters. That it generally, their characters are not as powerful as DC's, but they're more human, and that's been part of the Marvel approach throughout. In cinematic terms, what we're talking about here is the Marvel universe that's been created in the Disney brand, basically, which is things like with their ownership, making films like Iron Man. Now, Iron Man was the spearhead piece. Quite interesting because Art Shellhead has been an iconic character, but he was always seen as something of a slight second stringer compared to the really big
totally
ones.
agree.
Yeah.
But he was an interesting one to launch, and I think they made a very clever move there by getting Robert Downey Jr. to provide a really, really strong Tony Stark characterisation, as in a way to launch the franchise. And they built up from that. And then you start to build up. I mean, they had quite a clear strategy that they would introduce the standalone films and then bring it together for the Avengers. So you had things like you had the Captain America, you had Thor.
I mean, Captain America was the Human Torch in.
The Fantastic
That's
Four.
right, yeah, absolutely.
The first two series.
And as we've noted in previous podcasts, there's some very clever little references in that. For example, in Captain America the First Avenger, you see them at the Expo, and there is Horton's original Human Torch android in a glass cylinder there, which is quite interesting. So they are making quite a lot of very rich continuity references. The idea is it builds into a cohesive universe, and has also then expanded outwards. One of the biggest leaps I thought was Guardians of the Galaxy, because you then went out into space and you brought in things like Kree, and you're going up to the cosmic level that comes up from that. You get the introduction of Thanos, who's going to be becoming a major figure in the Infinity War. The way that they've expanded this, and most of the characters have had their own movies and they're expanding the franchise wider and wider. Other ones like, for example, Black Widow and Hawkeye, for example, both Avengers have not had their own standalone films, which is a bit of a letdown in some respects.
I think that there's a call for definitely either those to either do a solo movie or a movie together.
Yeah, and I think they could. I really think they need to introduce a strong female character. That's one major Achilles heel that they've got there.
Black Widow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
She's the one who's established.
Like
But there are things like She-Hulk, for example, could be a great way to go as well. I think the
That
She-Hulk
probably falls under the whole hype.
Yeah.
License,
License, yeah.
I think I've made known that I'm not a big fan of female versions of male characters.
I disagree with that
because I think you should be creating good female characters.
But I think that was.
And they only seem to exist in the super team, so things like Wasp and Black Widow and Scarlet Witch, whereas standalone seems to be Ms. Marvel, obviously based on Captain Marvel, She-Hulk based on Hulk, Spider-Man based on whatever. So.
But there were independent characters as opposed to merely converted feminized ones, like, for example, the way that they've feminized Thor, for example.
Yeah.
So I think
that works in the concept. Whoever holds the hammer has the power of Thor. So
I
do think that's acceptable.
I think Marvel has got some strong female characters, and they need to be bringing them out there into solo movies. So the MCU.
We've got Captain Marvel, haven't we, coming out? With, was it Carol Danvers? Set in the 90s and introducing the Skrull Empire.
But that would not really be Captain Marvel. That would be Ms. Marvel.
Carol
Danvers is not Ms. Marvel.
It's not Captain Marvel, but it is Captain Marvel.
Yeah. I'm quite annoyed by that because I'm a big fan of the original Captain Marvel, which is indeed a disputed name between. I think one of the great losses to the.
Currently, Generations one-off special those two meetings.
Jones's time's up.
Okay.
Right, so I think that's now back to Bold.
Back to me.
So,
what now?
What do you got?
I've got non-MCU.
All that
Lovely early 90s goodness.
Okay then, so the non-MCU, after you've taken the gulp of creativity juice,
For sure.
starts now.
Okay, so non-MCU. What are we talking here? We talking
Punisher from the 80s.
We've got Punisher of Dolph Lundgren.
How about Nick Fury with David Hasselhoff?
Nick Fury. Captain America.
Spider-Man with Nicholas Hammond from Sound of Music.
Bill
Bixby the Hulk.
Bill Bixby the Hulk. I was going to say David Banner.
David Banner.
And the favourite Daredevil pilot.
Affleck's Daredevil.
Affleck's Daredevil. Yeah. That film was aged badly. Affleck's Daredevil.
I don't know.
I tried watching it again, and the whole scene with the seesaw, it's just like, I can't watch this anymore. And I really enjoyed it when it came out.
I really watched it. I didn't think it was as bad as I thought it was going to be. And I think what really dated was the CGI in it. Because the 90s CGI, when they do an aerial pass across the rooftops, it's comical. But it's one of the technology that has moved forward. And it's one of the things that, for example, I think that films like Hellboy, where they use a lot of practical stuff, will date far worse. Yeah. And in fact, far less than the heavy CGI stuff. The worst thing in that film is the CGI plant. It really rankles.
But Hulk, I think that was probably one of my favourite non-MCU films. Despite John Woo's take on it, I like just how, as he does in the comics, depending on how angry he gets, he alters his dimensions. And for the time, it looked really good. I mean, I did prefer the Edward Norton film, which does tie into the MCU, but for the initial Hulk film, I was fairly happy with that. I would have liked to see another, as I'd still like to see another Hulk film now. Please, Marvel.
I mean, I like the John Woo version, and I know you've mentioned about the size of the Hulk, depending on how interviews. But do you know what? I never really noticed that in the comic, so I just found that a bit of an odd.
The Hulk's size is variable. It's not directly proportional to his angle rate. His strength is.
Yeah.
But the strength.
I just feel it's an odd thing to put in the movie because it's quite obvious in the film that he changes size. The Edward Norton thing I didn't think was any better than the John Woo.
It felt more like a Hulk film for me.
It's
kind of like a monster mash, wasn't it?
What's the Ang Lee one?
Ang Lee, sorry, not John
Sorry.
It was Ang Lee, wasn't it?
Schoolboy
We
Errors.
apologise.
We own the show.
Yeah, John Woo does Doves, Ang Lee did Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and
yeah.
So, well, what's got it there, James?
East one of us is away.
Yeah, and then we have the XMen franchise. And I think it's had some highs and lows.
Yeah.
Wolverine, I think it's only
impressive. It really was. And I have to say, I thought that the Days of Future Past as well.
Not that at all, so there'll probably be small shoes to fill.
Yeah, but they film them short, don't they?
But even something like, I thought the X-Men pretty much, the first X-Men film pretty much reinvented the genre by using the modern techniques that had been devised for the Matrix in the filming film.
First Class, Days of Future Past, really good.
Magneto has been
enjoy
superb.
Apocalypse.
I get it. It's good. Yeah, I think Fassbender's Magneto is one of the strongest villains. Wonderful Vicky take.
Yeah, fun, funny, just a great watch. And
the use of the first one all worked pretty well. The cinematography was really strong in it.
Yeah.
The overhead shots and we're going across the Amazon are really cool. Yeah.
I loved the scene very early on where you see the warships out to sea and it's all dark. And they go through the mist and suddenly
the Amazons managed to fight off the German landing party, right? Who's still on the ship? Because I'll bet you that's not the entire crew problem of that bloody ship.
Well, that's very true. Yeah.
They're like what? They just triumphed, did they? Didn't really think that one through.
It's going to just push that under the carpet.
It's just like I thought it crashed.
Has it not? It's so good.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
All right. So
you don't lose that. So what's your last one?
It's so you're intact.
Yeah.
All right. So I've got. I'm going to edit this bit out. I've got Superman or Batman, and I'm starting now. Superman or Batman? Okay, if you're talking about cool, I think you're probably talking about Batman, unless you're thinking of the 1950s or 1960s Batman. Superman, do you know what? I want to love his day-glow world. I don't love it as much as I do Batman. Superman's got the real fantasy element to it. You've got somebody that's from another planet. That planet exploded. He was sent to Earth in a rocket by his parents. They were going to die. They wanted to save their son. Superman gets adopted by the Kents. He has superpower because he's on a lower gravity.
And under the light of a yellow sun.
Yellow sun. So therefore he had the superpowers. Batman has more of, I think, of a believable origin, where his parents were murdered by effectively a mugger. Obviously, the film universe, the Michael Keaton. I always want to say Buster Keaton. The Michael Keaton Batman, you know, they try and link it in that the Mugger was actually a Joker, which, you know, in respect of the movie, you created me, I created you. Okay,
It's
it's
a nice,
not.
thing
It's
for
a
movie,
nice
isn't it?
conceit, but it's not part of the
Because
character.
the irony of it is because the Joker was not one of his Batman's original enemies. He comes along quite a few years into the Batman run.
But he's Red Hood.
Mm.
He's originally Red Hood, who falls into a vat of,
Yeah.
is it Access Chemicals?
Probably,
No,
yeah.
probably not. But you're talking about two worlds, and the reason I chose this, we had this thing that we would choose at random 5 items, and that, you know, a couple of items out of 30 odd that we had here, and we would trade if we couldn't talk about it. But the thing that really struck me and why I wanted to do this one was I'm thinking about the animated series of Batman and Superman in the 1990s, and I think that really demonstrates the contrast between these two characters.
25th anniversary of the Batman.
Yes, indeed it is. Perhaps we should have done a podcast on that. Yes, it is. It is the 25th anniversary. With Batman, the action colour palette is very muted. There's lots of browns on it. It's very sort of retro. There is 1940s feeling. But you know what? It really works for the character. It just works really well. If you look at the Superman animated series produced in the same era, although it's a couple of years later, it's more day glow. When you look at Lois Lane's eyes, they're sort of really bright blue. They really stand out. Whereas the Batman cartoon, it's like the female lead characters are sort of more subdued.
But to fight the Superman corner on this one, with Max Fleischer cartoons made in the 40s,
Yeah.
they massively pushed forward animation. They got a huge budget, about 3 times what they needed to make it, and they advanced animation technique enormously. And that's that animated series is why Superman flies, whereas originally he jumped. Because it just looks stupid when you animate it. There is still footage that shows him jumping, and he just looks like an idiot. And even the Hulk still gets around that way. You know, it's kind of odd.
I found it interesting that the Hulk uses that conceit about jumping rather than flying, whereas Superman can just defy gravity now. Although his original power, because he was in a low gravity environment, would
jump.
you
Yeah.
more than
His powers have certainly evolved over the years.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And he held the unique position of being the first superhero. Curiously, and I only discovered this the other day, he was partly influenced by Doc Savage. His name, Clark, is influenced by, I think the original name for Doc Savage, and the reason he's called the Man of Steel is riffing off the Man of Bronze. Although Doc Savage is a much more Batman-like figure, because he's a human.
But I've got 18 seconds. Batman actually riffs off of Zorro. With the secret
the Batcave.
thing. That's 9 seconds. Secret base under the building.
Yeah.
And I think with Zorro in the movies, he was behind a fire, so you're not going to check there. Oh, time over for me. Right, that concludes.
There is a 30 Zorro, a 40 Zorro, and it is really obvious when you look at it that this is a prototype for Batman. It's before Batman. But you look at the cave and the way that he goes in it, absolutely.
Right, okay, that's BCH Chaos, and it certainly felt like it tonight. So we've talked about a number of subjects. We won't tell you what the other subjects were. They all were here, and I think I'll put them in the box and leave those, and maybe we'll talk about those next time. So thank you for joining us. So thank you, James. Thank you, Bod. And thank you, me. And thank you. And good night.
Right.